able to just improvise these tales.
There's a very touching account by Robinson Duckworth, who was rowing the boat with the children along with Lewis Carroll. As Carroll is telling the story, Duckworth turns and says to Lewis Carroll, "Are you extemporizing this story? Are you sort of making it up?" And Lewis Carroll says, "Yes, I'm just making it up as we go along."
It's Alice who dominates, and it's about Alice, really. But they all had roles to play in the Alice story.
I never knew a thing about the weather, never know a thing for me.
In the chapter in Alice in Wonderland, The Pool of Tears, there's reference to a dodo, and Lewis Carroll, who had a slight speech impediment, a stutter or a hesitation, was himself the dodo.
And Duckworth, the other Don, is the duck. His name is Robin Duckworth, so he's obviously the duck.
And then there's an Eaglet, who was the sister of Edith Little, and there was a Laurie, who was Lorena. So they're all there.
Would you mind helping me? Please.
Carroll not only introduced people who were present as he improvised the story of Alice, he also introduced all sorts of real-life events and people. The caucus race is a great example of this.
A caucus race, where a bunch of animals run around in circles, is actually a reference to a political situation where a bunch of politicians get together and yell and nobody's making any sense and everybody runs around and doesn't really get anywhere.
I'm Will Finn, and I'm an animator and story artist. The book is a little bit of an enigma. You can read things into it. Carroll was never terribly forthcoming any more than telling us that it was nonsense conceived for a real little girl called Alice. And maybe that's all it was. A lot of people see political things in it. Some people believe that Alice is really Queen Victoria, and it's her journey through the hierarchy of English politics.
There's been many ways of looking at these stories, and certainly one would suppose that in a sense, Dodson was having a laugh at the expense of people who had pompous ways of talking and looking at the world.
Dodson told various versions of the story. He had such a ready wit, he could make these little girls laugh by taking one of them, sending her down a rabbit hole, and then just making all these bizarre situations.
Oh, Mr. Rabbit!
Finally, Alice begged him to write down the stories in a written form so that they could have a sort of a memento.
Alice Little wrote, "I started to pester him to write down the story for me, which I had never done before. It was due to my going on and going on that he eventually gave the promise which started him writing it down at all." And Lewis Carroll's memory of that. "And so to please a child I loved, I printed in manuscript and illustrated with my own crude designs the book. In writing it out, I added many fresh ideas which seemed to grow of themselves upon the original stock."
And so he wrote out a very elaborate manuscript, drew his own little drawings in the margins, and created a book that was so admired by the dean's family and by everyone who visited that they suggested to Dodson that he publish it.
He sent it off to very dear friends, the MacDonald family, who had a gaggle of children, and said, "Would you please read this to your children and tell me what they think of it and whether you think I should publish it?" And they were all in favor of it.
Well, my name is Alice, and I'm following a white rabbit, so...
The first version of Alice's Adventures Underground has his own illustrations. He was wise enough to realise that they weren't good enough for publication and got John Tenniel, one of the great British political cartoonists, the man who was in fact regarded as the finest artist working in the magazine Punch and other publications of its kind in Britain.
John Tenniel was a very busy man and very famous, and it took a long time to publish, but it did finally appear.
The oysters were curious too.
When the book first came out in the 1860s, it struck people as something very, very fresh and fun.
This book and its sequel, Through the Looking Glass, become a blast of fresh air that blows straight through children's literature, and after which it is never, ever the same again.
Well, perhaps I could spare a little time.
You could?
One thing he absolutely insisted upon was that there would never be a moral in his books, which goes exactly against what the usual tenor of children's books were in those days.
Until Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, children's literature had one single goal in mind. It was to improve the mind of the child, to make the child better behaved, to make them be quiet and observant and tidy and neat and to do their work. It was a suppressive literature. Without Lewis Carroll, children's literature would not be what it is today. We would still be bogged down in this world of pious, moralizing literature. But Lewis Carroll just changes it in a stroke.
My brain begins to work.
Walt Disney was probably about 9 years old when his family moved from the family farm to Kansas City. And Walt said at some point that he had read Lewis Carroll's books as a schoolboy.
It's impossible to imagine that any young man of that era would not have read that book. I suspect Walt read it a number of times, and it was something that he kept coming back to.
And in 19